Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 243, November the 6th, 2017, Monday. Yes indeed, it is Monday. And I want to talk today about something that happened to me Sunday morning. And it goes actually back to the video that I did on Saturday night. I don't know how many of you saw my Saturday night video. It didn't get uploaded till really late. But I did a video on Saturday evening where I basically laid out the fact that there was two narratives: the Trump-Russia narrative, which is basically dead, and then the other narrative, which is the general narrative of Russia hacked the elections, hacked the DNC, gave that information to WikiLeaks, and that's what cost Hillary the election, and all that sort of stuff. And I was pointing out that the first narrative is dead, and that the second narrative of Russia hacking the DNC was going to go away because of things that I explained later in the video, such as the fact that there's a new lawsuit that was just filed this past Tuesday, and in this particular civil lawsuit, it will require the discovery process. It will also require a deposition process where there will be a court order for the DNC server to finally be analyzed. And once that happens, and they find that the breach did not occur from an outside source, but occurred within the LAN, the local area network, that would lead the next question on everybody's mind would be, okay, well, if it wasn't the Russians that hacked the DNC and gave that information to WikiLeaks, then how did that information get to WikiLeaks? In which case, everyone's going to say, well, it must have been someone on the inside, someone who leaked those documents and downloaded them locally, leaked them to WikiLeaks. And of course, that would lead everyone to the logical conclusion of who that may have been, of Seth Rich. But because it's what we were all talking about back in the summer of 2016. Now, I have to tell you that the following morning, I got up on Sunday morning and I went to the normal news sites that I look at, the Washington Examiner, the Washington Post, various other news sites that I have a tendency to look at on Sunday mornings. There's about a dozen or so that I look at. And there I saw on Sunday morning this piece from the Washington Post where they were giving more revelations because they got an advanced copy of the book. Now, when I did the video on Saturday, the only thing that they had come out and talked about was the fact that Brazile had stated in her Politico piece, as well as what they have in the book, pointing out that the election was rigged, Hillary took over the DNC and all that, which we talked about. But hadn't been brought up yet about this stuff involving Seth Rich. That had not been brought up yet when I did the video on Saturday night where I talked about that. And to be honest with you, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that Donna Brazile in her book would ever talk about Seth Rich. Because Seth Rich, especially for Democrats, has been taboo subject since last summer. It's the subject that when you say Seth Rich, Democrats just walk away. They have no comment. They're not permitted to even talk about it. So it blew my mind Sunday morning to get up and read this piece in the Washington Post, which by then had been picked up and copied by many other people, about Donna Brazile coming out and talking about Seth Rich. It was a little creepy, to be honest with you. I don't have a crystal ball, I don't have ESP, and I had no idea that there was going to be any revelation in Donna Brazile's book about Seth Rich when I made that video on Saturday night. So I don't really know what to say. I didn't have any inside information or anything like that. It's just where that video led me. It's the obvious point. That's what I was making in the video. This is the obvious conclusion. If you follow these things through to their conclusion, this is where it ends up. If we do have an investigation of the server and they find that it was not an outside hack, but rather it was a leak, it was breached from the inside, from within the local area network, then that kills the Russian narrative of that the Russians hacked the DNC. And the only next logical question to ask is, okay, who did? And the only next logical rational response to that question would be probably Seth Rich. I mean, it's just I was following logic, which is what I generally do. So I was quite shocked, and I think I felt, it was a little creepy to get up Sunday morning and read that. But since that is now out there and everybody's talking about it, let's explore a little bit of this extraordinary revelation by Donna Brazile. I mean, like I said, talking about the DNC being hacked, the mismanagement by Wasserman, Blabbermouth, Schultz, and Barack Obama, the corruption with the Clinton campaign. These are all things, none of these things terribly surprise me. She's being paid a lot of money. She's probably not a big fan of Hillary. She's trying to rescue the DNC and the Democratic Party. There's reasons that you could give for why she would do that. But why would she come out and start talking about Seth Rich? And some of the things that she says, and we haven't even got it all. This is just what the Washington Post did a few paragraphs from the book, which they received about a week ago. They got an advance copy. So let's go through some of these things that were in that Washington Post article and see what we can learn. She says, according to the Washington Post, that she was feeling paranoia after the Seth Rich murder, that she began to shut the blinds to her office so snipers could not see her. That is paranoia. She says that she installed surveillance cameras at her home, and she wondered if Russians bugged her DNC suite with listening devices. That is paranoia, but you have to wonder, why would the murder of Seth Rich make her paranoid about snipers? Why would her logical leap go from Seth Rich has been murdered, uh-oh, I better look out for snipers? There has to be a lot of things going on in between those two thoughts to go from that point to the next conclusion. There has to be things going on in the middle of that, or none of it makes sense. She also said that officers of the DNC, where she was the interim co-chair at the time when she's recounting this in her book, had told her not to talk about the hacked emails. In other words, it was a gag order not to talk about the hacked emails, and certainly not to talk about Seth Rich. We all understand that because that was exactly their behavior at the time when a lot of people were asking questions and they had nothing to say. She also says that she attended Barack Obama's 55th birthday party, and at that party, Holder and Rice, that would be Eric Holder, the Attorney General, and Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, pulled her aside and told her to take the matter seriously. How did she read that when they said take the matter seriously? The way that she obviously interpreted that was, don't you talk about Seth Rich. Could be dangerous to talk about Seth Rich. You better take that seriously. They were giving her a warning. They were giving her a warning. Now we know from the detective who had been working the case, Mr. DiEugeno, I believe his name is, he had been contacted by Rob Wheeler. In fact, they actually had 2 meetings. And in that meeting, Rob Wheeler learned from this detective that he knew that Seth Rich had been in a verbal confrontation with one of his bosses at the DNC, but he did not know who. Rob Wheeler later found out that it was Donna Brazile. Then George Webb verified that because he spoke to 2 people who worked with Seth Rich, and they also suspect he talked with one of his roommates. And while they wouldn't go on the record with their names or go on camera, they said actually there was 2 heated discussions between Donna Brazile and Seth Rich. We also know that it was Donna Brazile who was put in charge of putting the clamp down on any further investigation into the Seth Rich case, because once she heard about Rob Wheeler, she immediately contacted the detective there in D.C. and demanded to know everything that they had talked about. She wanted recordings or transcripts if he had them, and she wanted to know why he was snooping around, and she wanted to know why they were continuing their investigation when in fact they had already determined it was a botched robbery. So someone had put pressure on Donna Brazile. She also called the Riches and talked to Seth Rich's father and asked him why he was working with Rod Wheeler and supporting Rod Wheeler to further investigate the death of his son. So she was obviously busy working the phones. Someone obviously put Donna Brazile in charge of clamping down on the Seth Rich investigation by Rob Wheeler and any other independent people trying to investigate it. She even was trying to clamp down on the detective, one of the detectives who are working the case. Brazile also says, according to the Washington Post, that she feared retribution for... Let me start again. Brazile says that she feared retribution from shadowy elements within the campaign and the Democratic Party who might blame her for the leak. Now keep in mind, Seth Rich worked under her. And so she's feeling like there may be retribution. She's fearing retribution from the shadowy elements within the campaign and the Democratic Party who might blame her for the leak. Who would that be, do you think? You think it might be the rotten reverend being the shadowy element? And why, again, would she jump to this point of paranoia? Why would she jump to this conclusion? What did the leaks have to do with her? There was a lot of people working at the DNC. She wasn't in charge of the IT department. She wasn't even paid at that point. During the time of the Seth Rich murder, according to Donna Brazile, she was there volunteering. She wasn't even in a paid position. She didn't accept a paid position until they made her interim head after Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz was forced to resign. But why would she fear retribution from shadowy elements within the campaign and the Democratic Party when in fact she was just a volunteer? She had nothing to do with the IT department. She had nothing to do with the hacks or leaks. And you notice the word leak in this particular paragraph of the Washington Post piece, because up until now, Donna Brazile has been writing the story that it was all a Russian hack. But now it appears that she's changed her terminology to leak. She's gone from hack to leak. Does that mean that at some point during this process she began to believe all the reports and all the independent media and all the people probably asking her questions? That maybe in fact it wasn't a hack after all, and maybe it was a leak? Maybe Donna Brazile had begun to come around and to become skeptical and start to give some credence to the idea that it may have been a lot more than just a failed robbery, and that the reason would have been leaking information. Therefore, there would not be a Russian hack, but rather a leak. Maybe she was coming around to that point of view. And the most interesting question you have to ask from just the whole article that's talking about Brazile fearing the DNC or fearing retribution or fearing snipers, covering her windows, installing a surveillance system, you have to ask yourself, why would Brazile fear for her life if Seth Rich's death was nothing more than a botched robbery? How would she go from, well, the death of Seth Rich was a botched robbery by a couple of local thugs. Oh, but I better be fearing snipers and I better cover my windows and get a surveillance system. You see, there's things missing here. There are things missing. These are not logical conclusions. These are not logical leaps. You do not go from, yeah, this DNC staffer was robbed involved in a failed robbery which resulted in his death, and therefore I should fear snipers. These are not logical conclusions to leap to. There has to be something else in between that. Don't know if we're going to learn what that something else is in her book, but it could have been a combination of a lot of things. We'll just have to wait until the book comes out, unless the Washington Post goes into more detail, assuming that Brazile herself goes into more detail. Maybe this is the way she lays it out, and she doesn't supply any information, but I would find that hard to believe because, you know, there are editors who read these books, and if I'm an editor and I read this book, I would say, okay, well, that's some really fantastic information you're getting out there, but we have a void here. We have, you know, the story is not adding up. You need to fill in the blanks here. You need to fill in the space. You know, you need to fill in how you go from a failed robbery of a staffer to you determining that that should make you fear a sniper or retribution. You've got to fill in that gap. You can't just leave that kind of a void in there. Because for one reason, it opens up a million questions. She says that she was haunted by Seth Rich's death. Haunted, that's an interesting word. Haunted. That can mean a lot of things. But if you're a person who claims to be a spiritual person like Donna Brazile, haunted would mean your conscience. It would mean that your conscience is eating away at you because you know that there's something that isn't right that you may be involved in, that you may be a part of, whether you agreed to be a part of it or just got sucked into it. The fact that you have this knowledge or you have this gut instinct, you have this feeling, maybe you have some information, you are consternated, you are not able to have peace with yourself. And so you have an issue with your conscience, and it is a haunting experience to have. Let's keep in mind that Donna Brazile has known the Clintons for a very long time. As I said, she worked in the first Clinton administration. She was also very good friends with Ron Brown. Ron Brown was Slick Willie's Commerce Secretary. At the time, there was several different Clinton scandals going on, and he was going to be questioned about one of those scandals. He was supposed to be testifying when he got back from a trip that he was on. But he never made it back alive from that trip because he was killed in a plane crash. But at that time, after the plane crash, it was rumored, and I don't know if there's any hard evidence to this, but it was rumored that they had determined that he had also sustained a gunshot wound to the head at some point during that plane crash. Now that's awfully strange. Someone shoots you in the head while the plane's going down, or prior to the plane going down, or something. How do you end up with a gunshot wound to your head when you're in an airplane that's going down? She was good friends with Ron Brown, and she probably heard those rumors as well. Maybe she knows that a lot of people, having known the Clintons for a long time, who have been scheduled to testify in hearings regarding the Clintons and their criminal activities, dozens of them have come up dead under suspicious circumstances. Ron Brown was just one of many people who ended up dead under suspicious circumstances. I'm sure most of you have seen the list. Most of you are familiar with the term the Clinton body count. It's real. These are real people who really died under really strange circumstances, who were really close to the Clintons, who really were going to be involved in some sort of investigation where they may have to testify, or they had information that could be damaging to the Clintons. Donna Brazile knows every bit of this. Maybe her conscience is getting to her. It's hard to say what's going on in her mind. She also said something else that's very interesting. She was talking about there being rats in the basement, and she said it was a troubling feeling to know that they are there or have been there. Who are the rats that she's talking about? She could be talking about the Russians, but I don't know that Donna Brazile still believes the Russian story. It's becoming likely that she did not, because now she's talking about shadowy elements within the campaign in the Democratic Party. She's talking about snipers. She's talking about fearing something or someone. Now, maybe this answers the question as to why she wrote that book, which is what we were talking about on Friday night. And I gave 3 or 4 different reasons why she might be writing the book. Well, I'll tell you, when you have information that could be damaging to someone, and you feel like it may get you killed, the very best thing you can do is go public. You go public because now you're in the public spotlight. You become too hot to touch. You know, had she not made any of these statements in this book, had she not written a Politico piece, had she not brought any of this to light, she could have had an accident and no one would have thought too much about it, any more than they do about any of these other accidents of people associated with the Clintons. But now that she's come out and made these incredible statements, she's protected, because now if something happens to her, there will be a lot more scrutiny, a lot more speculation, and a lot more attention paid to anyone who might have gained from her demise. So this may be the real reason that she wrote that book, is because she's living in all this fear. She's being haunted. Her conscience is getting to her. She's worried about snipers. She's worried about shadowy figures from the deep state, from the Clinton machine. And maybe she feels, or maybe she heard something in the wind, that there may be some retribution. Because we all know that the Clintons keep an enemies list. And we all know that they are hardcore believers in retribution. That when you cost the Clintons money or power, someone has to pay. They are an organized crime syndicate. And that's how organized crime syndicates operate. You cannot let people screw you and get away with it. You must make an example of them, like Seth Rich. Seth Rich did harm to the rotten Reverend Clinton, and she was in charge of the DNC at the time. Podesta stated in his email that they would have to make an example. He's part of that mafia. If Donna Brazile suddenly had a moment of real logic and reason entering into her mind with all that she knows, and she thought, they took out Seth, they've taken out other people, maybe they're going to take me out. Maybe there's retribution coming my way. Maybe that was in the wind. Maybe someone whispered in her ear. Maybe she heard through the grapevine that Clinton was beginning to launch her retribution efforts to take all the people out who she believes were responsible for costing her what she believed was rightfully hers, the presidency. I asked the question on Saturday night, is the rotten Reverend capable of murder in order to achieve power? Would she also be capable of murder for anyone who she believes cost her her opportunity at that power or becoming president? Does she have a list of people she's going to have retribution against? The Clintons are known for this. They definitely go back and revisit issues. They know that revenge is a dish best served cold. Maybe Donna Brazile was feeling a chill in the air and realized that the time might be ripe for some retribution, and that she may have had a target on her back. There's a lot going on here, friends. You do not make the leaps that she's making. They are not logical. There has to be some other information that we're not getting yet, or that we may never get. But either way, Donna Brazile clearly is behaving in a way of someone who is frightened. Who would she be frightened of? Why would she fear snipers? Who are these elements, shadowy elements of the establishment and of the Democratic Party that she would fear? Who would have the ability, the capability, who would have the reason, the motive to want to do her harm? These are some questions that probably need to be answered. I don't know if they'll be answered in her book. And we know that she's trying to come out and backtrack on some things. She probably got the phone call and probably knew that was going to happen, but she accomplished her goal. If her goal was to make sure that she put herself out there in the spotlight and put this information out there to make it very difficult for the Rotten Reverend to put a hit on her, then she accomplished what she needed to do. Yes, she's going to take a lot of heat from Democrats and other people in the party, but she may have saved her life, because now it'd be tough to put a hit on her, because it will be obvious who might be behind it. And maybe that was the whole point of that book after all. So maybe now we've answered that question. Why did she write that book? To save her life. Thank you for tuning in. A lot of other breaking news that we didn't get to over the weekend that I'll be covering, including the connections of the Right Reverend Clinton to the Saudi billionaire who was just arrested and some of his friends. Boy, that's some interesting stuff we're going to get into. We'll get to it on Tuesday evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys have a good night. Bye.